Hi you guys. So we're almost done with Vlogmas. This video was actually supposed to be one of my first videos, but the day I went to film it, I was like near an airport and things were going fine, and then all of a sudden airplanes started taking off like every 30 seconds. It was like, basically it was like if I was filming at home, except instead of cats meowing, it was airplanes taking off. And so I had to move this to the end of the Vlogmas calendar, but I still wanted to post it and tell you guys about this new documentary called The Animal People. I got to see it at the beginning of the month at one of the early screenings at the Downtown Independent in Los Angeles. There was also a Q&A at the end with some of the filmmakers and also the activists who were the subject of the documentary. I'll include a little bit of that at the end of this video. So if you haven't heard of this film yet, it's about the Stop Huntington Animal Cruelty campaign and the SHAC 7. A lot of the timeline was in like the 90s and the early 2000s, where these activists were organizing a strategic campaign against an animal testing facility. I don't want to include too much information about the film itself because I want you to go watch it, and you can actually stream it now on iTunes. But I will put links in the description below, both to the film itself and then also to an article that kind of goes over the history of the campaign in case you're not familiar with it. What I did want to say though is that while I was watching this film, it was kind of like I was watching two different stories. One being obviously the story of the SHAC 7 in the documentary, and the other being all the ways that this campaign influenced me and my activism, and how it influenced my friends who were activists and the campaigns that I was working on. So some of the main takeaways that I got from the SHAC campaign were to kind of think outside the box in my activism. You know, at the time when I was a little baby activist just starting out, a lot of the campaigns that I was participating in were people would go to a pet store or a fur store or whatever and just show up and protest and do the same thing every week or every time the event was organized, using the same tactic forever for the entire campaign. And sometimes you would get results with that, sometimes you wouldn't, but it didn't really matter. People weren't changing their strategies, people weren't willing to try other tactics, try new things. So when I ran my pet store campaign against a pet store that was selling puppies from puppy mills, I always try to keep in mind that there's not just one way to do things, and it's important to always stay creative and also think about what you want the result of your action to be. Like, not just show up and protest and yell at people because it feels good, but think about like, what do I want to actually come from this? Like, what is my intention in doing this? Like, how is me doing this going to benefit the animals and help my campaign? And honestly, I'm not gonna lie, like some of these tactics have helped me in business too. Like, I thought back to one time I had a client who wouldn't pay me, and I don't want to go too deep into that story, but I will tell you that they paid me. Like, don't try to take advantage of an activist, okay? Not a good idea. So another main takeaway for me with the SHAC campaign was to be smarter legally. The activists in this campaign were charged with animal enterprise terrorism for doing what is basically legal free speech activity. And I think that with animal rights activism and probably other types of activism, there's this feeling like I am doing the right thing. You know, just deeply knowing in your heart that you're doing the right thing, it kind of creates this feeling of like, I can't possibly get in trouble for this, right? But unfortunately it turns out that you can. And as far as I know, these activists in the SHAC campaign were pretty smart about legal stuff, and they still got. And I know that one way this affected my friends and I in our activism was that we knew we couldn't just show up and wing it. Like, we had to know our stuff. We had to know what the laws were that could potentially affect our campaign and our protests, and we knew that they could vary from city to city and county to county. We like consulted with lawyers and had legal observers and basically just tried to stay on top of that stuff like as much as possible. And it really didn't matter like how fluffy or easy or harmless a campaign or action was going to be. Like, I could be thinking like, I'm gonna go pass out leaflets or I'm gonna write a blog post about this, and I would still have to do research on what I can legally do and say, and if I was unsure about something, I would ask a lawyer for help. So I don't want to go too much in my own experience on this video. The purpose of it is to tell you to go watch The Animal People on iTunes if you haven't seen it yet. If you have seen it, or if you watch it because of this video, let me know what you think. But I think whether you're an animal rights activist or you're an activist for some other cause, this film will be interesting to you. And I think it was really well done. I'm someone who's been aware of the SHAC campaign for probably 10 years now, and I still learned things that I didn't know before. But I think they did a really good job of taking like a complicated subject and telling you as much of the story as possible in 90 minutes. So I think that's all I wanted to say. I will put that Q&A clip at the end. Let me know if you have any questions, comments, etc. And I think my clip cuts off what the question actually was. So the moderator was Georgia Fox, and I believe this was an audience question, and someone basically asked what advice these SHAC activists would have for activists now. So I will post their answer here and see you in the next video. Let me know what you think of the movie. Okay, bye.
Rescue from other individuals and other groups is beautiful and amazing and inspires others. And sometimes the more mundane activities like research, we're sending out multiple, tens of thousands of packets of xenotransplantation research reports that we had printed on glossy paper that you designed. I remember stuffing, I think it was 1,800 of them, and had an attempt to pick them up from a warehouse outside of JFK and drive them down to Philadelphia, and my little Volkswagen was grinding on the I-95 because of the weight of all the pamphlets in it. And Kevin and I stuffed them over the course of 3 days, and 2/3 of those prospective customers that HLS could have engaged with vowed to not involve themselves with Huntington Life Sciences because of that mailing. So, no disrespect to your film, that didn't make it into the film, it wasn't that noticeable, but that's a big victory, so diversity of tactics means all of it. So don't ever say, I didn't do enough, just keep doing it.
Two-part question, right?
Well, yeah, also...
Never mind. I wasn't paying attention either, apparently.
I'm sorry, guys. Maybe I should just turn it over to the audience.
I'm sorry.
No, Jake, do you have any advice for activists?
Yeah, I think I have lots of advice because I'm a bit of a loudmouth and I just ramble on for a long time, so I'll talk for the next 3 or 4 hours. But anyway, no, I think what's important for activists is to think about what we want to achieve and not confuse tactics with strategies. I think in the animal rights movement, we often pick one tactic or 2 tactics and just stick with it and think that's what's going to change the world. When in fact, I think we need smart, strategic strategies and campaigns that use a multitude of tactics. Pretty much, what Andy was saying. We have to use every strategic and creative tool in the toolbox to achieve the things that we want to achieve. And we need to set out smart, strategic campaigns that have tangible goals. Everyone loves to win. No one likes to lose, particularly, I think we can all relate to that. And so we need to give ourselves, tangible goals, and that's how I think we start to build bigger and broader movements, right? People want to be part of that winning team, and they jump on board, and we saw that in the SHAC campaign. In the beginning of SHAC in the United States, there was just a handful of us out there doing these things, day in, day out. But as we started to get these little wins, like the janitors or the food suppliers and so forth and so on, people started realizing, oh, we can start to win. And they wanted to be a part of that. Then we start getting these market makers, to give up making markets, buying and selling shares for this laboratory, to the point where if you don't have enough market makers, you get kicked off the New York Stock Exchange. And we got them kicked off the New York Stock Exchange. And it was very exciting. But it wasn't that hard to do. You could get rid of a market maker in a day by gumming up their phones, because that's what they rely on for their business, right? But it took that time to figure out how these things work and the tactics you can use to win. And you start having these victories, and the victories get bigger and bigger, and your movements get bigger and bigger. And then you start realizing the power that we all have as grassroots movements, as grassroots communities, and the things that we can achieve if we all work together and we're smart and creative. So that's a long-winded way, I guess, of me just saying, be smart, creative, be strategic, and pick tangible goals that we can fight towards and we can win.
What I would say is that there is no struggle on Earth right now that is new. Somewhere in the world, at some point in history, people just as flawed and fucked up as we, who were not heroes, who were just average, everyday folks, felt a pain in their heart that some of you feel as well. And they went forward and they decided they were going to do something about it. Some of them had failures. Some of them had successes. But all of them created lessons that we can learn. So if you want to be an effective activist, know your history. Know who came before you. All of us as activists had ancestors, and we need to respect that ancestry. We need to look at the lineage that we came from The animal rights movement was an extension of the animal welfare movement, which was an extension of the anti-vivisection movement, which found its philosophical forefathers in places like the Middle East and the Near East. And we can go back to Roman times and find people who felt the same way about non-humans as we do. And so if we can go back through history and find their examples, find where they failed and where they succeeded, we can make progress in the current time.